About 2 weeks ago, I booked an Airbnb in another country. I was going there for a concert. The room was cheap, so I knew I wasn't going to stay in a 5-star hotel, but it was only for one night, so I didn't mind as long as I had a bed. To start off, it already wasn't a great trip because my data roaming apparently didn't work in that country at all. I logged into a cafe Wi-Fi and planned my route in advance as best as I could. Managed to be at the house in time, rang the only bell and waited. Nobody came out. I repeatedly rang it and waited for 5 minutes. I noticed the door had a slot for mail and looked through it. I was shocked to see an entrance that looked like an abandoned barn. A super dusty couch right in front of the door, pieces of furniture covered in cloth, very dirty and extremely old. I usually love old houses, but that just didn't look like a house that was in use or prepared for guests at all. I wondered if I was at the wrong house and what to do now, as a super old, unwashed looking guy walked towards the door from the street. I asked him if he knew where the Airbnb was. He mumbled something, which I interpreted as positive. So I asked him if he was Tim, my host. He said yes and opened the door for me. Well, I already described the entrance. The centerpiece was definitely the super old, creaky staircase that led to the upper part of the house. I followed him upstairs. He was heaving and coughing and stinking of cigarettes, which wasn't exactly pleasant, but alright. The second floor was also abandoned looking, super dark with clustered furniture hung with cloth and randomly thrown together, and a super creepy curtain that I couldn't catch a glimpse behind. Another stair up, and we're in my hallway, which was honestly the worst one. Cracks in the walls, old rule paintings, and crosses hung up next to them. It seriously looked like the set of a horror movie. I usually don't have a problem with decor like that. I'm kind of goth, so anything darkly inclined is my jam, but everything looked so badly taken care of that I got major creepo vibes from this house. He showed me the bathroom, which had a huge hole missing in the bathtub tiling and the wall. Everything looked super dirty. He showed me to my bedroom, which was honestly okay. There were just a lot of creepy dolls on the shelves that threw me off, but the bed seemed fine. I asked him if they had Wi-Fi and he said no, which really sucked. I really hoped they would have, because that meant I would have no way to communicate in there. I also asked him when checkout was the next day. He then said it doesn't matter. He then dragged himself up to the 4th story, which was in complete pitch black darkness by the way, so that gave me very weird vibes. I definitely didn't want to get into the shower, so I just quickly changed and charged my phone. When I went to the bathroom, I realized I didn't even notice the creepiest part. There were no locks at all. Not for the bathroom and not for my room. I also noticed that there were so many half-used items that someone who looked like the guest before me had left there, like shower gels, toothbrushes, and toothpaste. A random lash curler just lay abandoned on the shelf. Not like a here you go, for your use in case you forgot yours way, but it just looked like someone left it and nobody bothered to clean it. I already made my mind up that I would definitely not stay the night in this house. My mind was just spinning scenarios. What if all these products were left by the people before me? And why did nobody leave horrendous reviews? I was super spooked. I seriously debated if I should take all my shit to the concert, because it didn't feel safe in the slightest. But my back was really hurting from my heavy backpack, so I just took my essentials and left the room as soon as I could. Not without sliding a folded paper under the door, so I'd see if someone tried to open it in my absence. When I was coming down the staircase, I heard someone turning a key in the front door. I was a bit confused, but in the advert, it said that a couple lived there, so I expected to see the wife or girlfriend of the guy I'd already met. Instead, a middle-aged man enters and says, "Hey, I'm Tim." All I could think of, then who the fuck is the other guy? I was shitting myself inside, but I had brief small talk with him, and finally left the house. I was shook. Luckily I made it in time to the venue, and the concert was worth it. Afterwards, I was so tired that I knew I couldn't stay awake for the whole night, so I checked into a hostel. That was also not perfectly clean, but at least they had Wi-Fi, a proper shower, and a door that had a lock. The next day I got thrown out at 10 a.m, so I made my way to get the rest of my stuff. I don't know why, but I checked the mail slot again and jumped back. The old guy was just snoring on the couch directly in front of the entrance door. I I tried my best not to wake him up and snuck into my room to get my stuff. The door hadn't been opened, thankfully, and I finally left this godforsaken place. I don't know if I overreacted, but honestly, from the 2 Tims to the missing locks and a checkout that didn't matter, if I assumed the worst, this would have been the perfect setup to assault or murder someone. In the best case scenario, nothing would have happened, but I probably would have had panic attacks all night. Usually I love solo traveling, but this was just too much. If I remember correctly, this happened in January or February 2024. I was visiting family in southern France and I didn't want to stay at their place, even if they offered, for personal reasons that I won't share here. Note that I visit them quite often and usually last minute, so I would never book the same place. And I would sometimes book a hotel room, which was more expensive but better for me, as I don't necessarily want to socialize with the hosts. Even when I would book Airbnbs, I would always search for flats or studio flats, and not a room in the flat/house where other people live, as I want to be on my own, so this is an important criterion for me. So I booked this Airbnb within walking distance to where my family members stay, and it looks very nice on paper. I think it was marketed as a house or ground floor flat, with access to a yard and a garden. It was probably one of those cheaper options. I don't remember for sure, but I wasn't going there for leisure or planning to have a very nice place for myself, to have enjoyable holidays, if that makes sense, so I really wanted something for convenience and wouldn't pay extra for any kind of luxury. There were not a lot of reviews, but the few ones were pretty positive. So I go to that place with my suitcase, waiting in front of the house. I contact the landlord who should give me the keys, but he's late. I spent at least 1 hour waiting outside, and I'm trying to be patient, realizing at least the neighborhood is pretty nice and seems safe, even if I need to walk through areas that are slightly dodgy to get there from where my relatives stay. The landlord finally arrives. He seems like a fairly good man and apologizes profusely, saying he was in another town visiting his cousin or friends, and time flew by. First red flag. He says they were drinking and didn't have time to sober up, so he had to speed on the highway on his motorbike while being tipsy or drunk. He stops and asks me half jokingly not to say that in my review. I get a bit serious and tell him he shouldn't be drinking and driving, but he says he really didn't want to make me wait further. I tell him I won't flag that in my review. Spoiler alert, I will, but I didn't want to start off on the wrong foot. This guy is nice otherwise and seems trustworthy, very chatty and open to socializing, and frankly, I was just happy I could finally get in and drop my stuff. The second red flag is when he tells me I will be living in a small flat adjacent to the bigger house he lives in, but I shouldn't worry because I would have my own place, own bathroom, own kitchen, etc. I didn't like that too much, but I actually think it might be good because I am not super comfortable being on my own in a ground floor accommodation, knowing anyone can get into the yard and access the front door. I guess you could say I'm paranoid. So knowing that someone I quote-unquote know is close by in case something happens gives me a sense of safety. But I was wrong. He shows me around. It all seems okay. It's pretty old, but as I said, I wasn't looking for a luxury stay. The part where I would stay is on a lower level than street level. Not exactly like a basement because there is access to a garden, but I need to walk down a set of stairs outside and get into the flat through the backyard. This shows mostly when I'm in the bedroom, as I see through the windows that it's clearly at a lower level. Next red or rather yellow flag is when he shows me a door close to the bedroom, which is the connecting door between my part and his house. I was kind of expecting that, but thought he might need to at least cross the yard or access through the front door to get into my part of the house. He says his door stays closed and it's locked anyway. Not as a warning for me, not to try to open it, but more like, you'll notice there is the door. It's useless for you. And what's beyond it is not part of what you're renting. We chat a little bit. Too long for my taste, because I was tired and also still annoyed at his lateness, and I wasn't in the mood to socialize. He gives me his phone number because he said the Airbnb chat feature isn't that good, and that it's easier to use WhatsApp, and then he leaves. I start to settle down, open my suitcase, and get changed before leaving to visit the family. I then go back to the place in the evening and decide to have a shower. If I remember correctly, what I'm saying next happened before I took a shower, because I remember locking the bathroom door, which I never do when I know I'm on my own, and I recall being quite anxious when taking the shower. So the biggest red flag before the last drop. I'm sitting on the bed and I hear a knock and someone saying my name. 2 seconds later, before I get the chance to answer or even understand where the noise comes from, I hear keys turning in a lock and a door opening. As you might have guessed, it's the connecting door next to the bedroom. The guy enters and says he can't find his phone and that he might have left it downstairs. I'm a bit shocked, probably because if he had come 10 minutes later, I would have probably been naked, ready to take a shower or maybe walking around in a towel, since I'm supposedly alone. I know it might sound like I'm just being a pussy, but keep in mind I'm a relatively young woman alone in a house with a man in his 40s or 50s who has control over when he can get into my place at any time. I stay polite and try to tell him that no, I haven't seen his phone. I would have noticed, there's literally nothing except my open suitcase on a couch in the bedroom. He still gets in, speaking a lot, and it's very fast while I'm sitting there, not fully realizing what's happening and not having a chance to tell him to leave. He looks around the flat and obviously doesn't find the phone. Then he says sorry and probably asks if everything is fine, if I had dinner or something like that, and then he leaves again. At that point, I'm really wondering if I should stay or not, since I know you get refunded only if you cancel 2 nights in advance. I just thought I would lose the money for the night that has already started because it was already after 11 p.m. and the following one, knowing I had booked at least 4 nights. I really needed to take a shower, but questioning if I should, I tried to see if there were available hotel rooms, but it was already too late to book one, or they were already fully booked. I decided to take my shower real quick, wondering if he could hear the shower and deciding that he forgot something else to get in again. Nothing bad happens. I then go back to the bedroom, get dressed as fast as I can just in case, sit down and think. I decide that I will just stay for the night, and I'll probably be less paranoid in the morning if I'm still alive. That's when I notice the chairs in the bedroom. There are 2, and one of them has ropes tied around the armrests. The chairs are in good shape, and the rope is definitely not there to keep the armrests fixed to the chair, as they are just loose. To this day, I have no idea why they were there. I still decide I should sleep there for the night, and try to use a chair to block the door handle in the bedroom, like in the movies. But guys, this only works in the movies. I try with both chairs, trying to pile them up. Even trying to use the ropes one way or another, the handle can still go down enough to open the door easily. I think that at least if I leave them in front of the door, I'll hear if someone tries to open it. But the door opens the other way, and in any case, I didn't know what I'd do even if the noise woke me up. Again, I'm clearly paranoid and anxious, but living alone abroad, my motto is to never ever take risks for my own safety, as I'm usually the only one who can save myself, so it's better to avoid any tricky situation. Doesn't mean I never go out, but I wouldn't get drunk around people I don't trust, and I would take a cab if I feel unsafe going home on my own after midnight. I now live in a city that's rather safe, but has had too many bad encounters. Unfortunately, nothing unusual for most women, not to be careful. So from an external point of view, this is a story about someone booking an Airbnb with good reviews, with a nice and friendly landlord who is just overly open because he likes to meet people, and the ropes are just a detail. But for my anxious and paranoid self, it's the premise for a horror story or thriller, where you shout out the stupid and trusting victim to get away ASAP before the guy comes back. So I decided to call my brother, who came to pick me up around midnight, for me to spend the rest of my stay at his place. So I, my boyfriend, his best friend, and his girlfriend drove up to Big Bear on June 26th. Then a day later, another friend of ours drove on the 27th, and he was supposed to sleep downstairs, since there are only 2 bedrooms. The first night we stayed there, it was kind of creepy because the cabin was pretty remote, and of course, there were absolutely no lights outside. It is the woods with coyotes howling and bears, but nonetheless, completely normal activity. On the 27th, around 12 a.m., my boyfriend and I are in bed when suddenly our friend sleeping downstairs comes banging on the door, freaking out, saying he saw shadows in the woods and that the motion light came on and there was thumping outside. We got a little freaked, but my boyfriend got out of bed and checked the entire cabin and even went outside. Nothing. We go up to the other couple's room, where there's a porch with a sliding glass door that looks out to the woods. It's important to note that I am naturally very anxious and a scared person, while my boyfriend is a rock. He is calm and logical, while I tend to jump to the worst case scenario. My boyfriend goes over to check the last place in the cabin. So he pulls the curtain and jumps and yells, "Oh no." At this point, I'm terrified. My boyfriend is a 180-pound CrossFit coach, and to see a big guy like that scared is nauseating. He locked the door and backed away slowly. He quietly says, "There's a large man standing outside staring at us. He's just standing in the woods looking at us." At this point, I'm thinking he's fucking with me. He looks at me and says, "Go lock the door, now." That's when I knew he was serious. Everyone is of course freaking out. I run and lock the door behind us, and we all decide to stay in the room to keep an eye out. It's the middle of summer, and it's really hot, but we refuse to open a window. I'm so scared, but trying not to show it, as everyone else seems to have calmed down. About 30 minutes go by, and nothing happens. I get annoyed with the heat, and the fact that there's 5 people in a tiny room, and 3 of them are men, so my boyfriend and I go back to our room. I'm still pretty spooked, so my boyfriend tries to cheer me up. At this point, it's about 1:30 a.m. I told him that I was too scared to sleep with the lights off, and he tells me that it's fine. And he understands, so we just lay with the lights completely on. Finally, I start drifting to sleep when I hear a thud. I sit up and look at my boyfriend. He looks at me. Then the power cuts. I immediately start crying, and I'm trembling, and I can't see anything because it's pitch black. I try to get out of bed and run, but my legs are tangled in the sheets, and I fall. My boyfriend picks me up and we grab our phones and run to the other room where everyone else was staying. I'm completely hysterical at this point. I try to contact our host, but nothing will go through. I try to call my dad, but all of our phones say no service. We are alone out there. Thank goodness the friend who drove up after us had a different carrier because his phone had 1 bar. So he calls the local sheriff. I realize now it might be a bit of an overreaction, but at the time we kind of thought we were going to die. He's on the phone with the sheriff, and they transfer us to the utilities company. We give the address, and they tell us that we are too far in the woods, and they don't cover that area. At this point, we are wondering if the entire area has no power, or if the man outside had just cut our power. We call 911 to report suspicious activity and a power outage. They send the fire department. A few hours go by, and it's 3 o'clock in the morning, and suddenly the power comes back on. We fall asleep, and the next day we talk to some locals of the area. We told them our power went out, and he said that was strange and that shouldn't have happened. He told us the only reason that happens out here is because of a snowstorm. He said he couldn't explain it.